Hi, I'm Heather, and over the first book that Additionally, I really struggled with the writing. I found myself having to read and reread entire paragraphs of the book due to the author's style. While I'm accustomed to authors who spend a great deal of time on internal dialogue, such as Bridget Jones's Diary, the use of quotation marks and the style of writing left it unclear if things were actually being said in that moment, or if they've been previously said, or if it was just purely the main character imagining what people might have said. This style did not work, and it made the book really drag and hard to read. I read some reviews where people said there lacked a spark between the love interests, and I have to agree. This seemed to be connected more from their similar situations, their same trauma and grief. I think these things can be the foundation for really great friendships, but I don't know that it worked for this romance. I did finish the book, so while I was disappointed that the book wasn't what the description pitched it to be, I did find myself invested in the characters enough that I wanted to see how the story ended. I think perhaps I would have enjoyed this book more if the title and description weren't so misleading. The book had very little to do with the 8 hours that they were stranded during a blizzard. Most of the book takes place in the months after the blizzard, and I didn't find it as charming as the description indicates it's going to be, but rather a really intense look at the struggles that we face as we grow older, as we care for loved ones, and as we wonder about our career choices. You should read this book too, though, if you're a substantial reader and have additional time to spare. I think this book worked for me since I was on vacation for the holidays. Additionally, I think you should read this book too if you enjoy books where characters are at a crossroad in their personal and professional lives. My preferred genre of graphic novels is historical nonfiction. I really enjoy reading them as the images help me to better process information about the past. This was certainly the case for the second book I read this week, Wake, The Hidden History of Women-Led Slave Revolts by Rebecca Hall, with illustrations by Hugo Martinez. Graphic novels invite us to move slowly through the text and linger on the images, allowing the information to stay with us in that stillness. When I'm reading a traditional text or listening to an audiobook, I get pulled along with the story. However, graphic novels give me the space to move at a slower pace and to spend more time reflecting. In Wake, Rebecca Hall combines research on slave revolts with what she refers to as historical imagination, which is the recognition that not all information about enslaved people has been recorded, and that reclaiming their history requires envisioning aspects of their life along with the little information that was recorded. Towards the end of the graphic novel, she writes, and I just really love this part, "The story we are given about being Black in America is that we have no past and we have no say in the future. The future that doesn't contain us, but it must." Hall develops a complex and compelling look at the influence that women had in slave revolts. Women as a whole are often overlooked in history, and for Black women, that is especially so. Through the use of her research and her application of the historical imagination, Hall helps to create a compiled historical record for these women. The illustrations that Hugo Martinez creates complements Hall's writing well. The graphic novel is part memoir, and there's a panel where Martinez draws Hall both as herself, but also someone living in the past. This panel really caught my attention and made me consider how Hall was both researching people from hundreds of years ago, but also reflecting on her own lived experiences. One of the most striking parts of this graphic novel was Hall's documentation of how often her requests for research were rejected and the various hoops she was forced to go through in order to obtain even the smallest of records. It was a striking reminder to me that while we are over 150 years past slavery in the United States, many are still unwilling to fully examine its legacy, including refusing researchers access to information that could better help us understand it. You should read this too if you want to better understand the role of women in resisting slavery, along with a more nuanced view of how the Middle Passage functioned. I read this book over the course of 2 sittings, so this book is also great for someone who's short on time. Finally, as a graphic novel, this book is perfect for someone who enjoys having illustrations to aid in their understanding. The last book that I read this week is The Office of Historical Collections, which is a collection of novella and short stories by Danielle Evans. The stories of this book blend beautifully from one to the next and left me feeling that all the characters existed in the same world at the same time. If you've read The Overstory by Richard Powers, it has a similar approach in the way that the author moves from one story to the next, while giving a feeling that they might all be connected in some way. My favorite part of this book is that each story was layered. While the present moment is about one particular point in a character's life, Evans constructs the story to demonstrate how events of their past have really influenced their present actions. I feel this gives each of the stories a deeper complexity, and I was amazed at how quickly the author managed to create this depth for her characters. I've read entire novels about a singular character that did not provide as much dimension as Evans managed to do for these characters. I also appreciated Evans' ability to leave me both wanting more from the characters while also knowing that the story itself was over. I felt really content in the way that she wrapped them up. While the stories don't end with every loose end neatly finished, individual readers will find themselves, I think, pretty confident that they know what the conclusion of the story is. I wish I'd read this book with a book club so I could have debated with them over what the characters were going to do next. And actually, this might be a great way to use the comment section. So if you read this series of short stories, just leave a comment letting me know how you think things end for the characters. The one story that I really did want more from was the final one, the novella, The Office of Historical Corrections, which the book gets its title from. In the story, the author imagines federal bureaucrats tasked with providing official corrections to everything from commemorative historical plaques to posters in bakeries. I know I would enjoy writing an entire novel about people who would work this job and their experiences with this. Part of this might be that I have a master's in teaching history, and the main character finds herself working for the Office of Historical Corrections after leaving a job as a professor. So maybe the story kind of allowed me to envision a different possibility, an alternative use for my skill set. But overall, just the world building that Evans manages to do with this novella in such a short time is demonstrative of how immensely talented she is. This book was hands down my favorite one of the week, and it certainly, I think, might be a contender for my top 10 list at the end of this year. It was just that good. So you should certainly read this book if you're short on time, but just overall, the flow between the stories is beautiful. You can easily set down after a singular story and pick it up again later and not going to be missing anything. But you should read this too if you enjoy commentary on issues of race in America and characters that make you realize that even when you think you have a situation figured out, there remains so much more to learn. All right. So those are my reads for this week. In this coming week, I'm going to be reading I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy and Spare by Prince Harry. So check back for next week's episode as I recap my thoughts on those books.